Hey everyone, welcome to another reaction video, and as promised, I'm looking at NieR Automata and looking at a bit more forest music from some JRPGs that I haven't quite yet played. And it's going to be the Forest Kingdom from NieR Automata today. Hopefully I'm going to really like it. I have not heard it, unless I've heard it in passing in some other video or something at some point, but I've never gone looking for it, and I know this game has a great soundtrack, and it's one of the more famous ones, I think, that I haven't been exposed to at all. So I'm pretty excited. I also would love to have another thing to add to my Forest Core playlist that we just created on the last video. I'm, trying to not put my expectations too high. Maybe it won't make it. You'll have to stick around and see if I decide I want to listen to it again in the future and put it on that playlist. And before we get started, though, I'm not going to say too much about the context musically because I really have no idea what I'm going to hear. And a lot of my thoughts about like game music and forest music you can hear in my last video about Final Fantasy XVI's Greatwood. And I don't want to repeat too many of those thoughts in that discussion. So please check that out if you want to know a little bit more about talking about how forest music works in games. And the purposes of it. But what I do want to mention is the title of the piece, the Japanese, which is actually kind of interesting because it's in Japanese, it's Mori no Okoku, Mori being forest and Okoku being kingdom. And in this case, not only do they choose to use, of course, it's all kanji except for the possessive marker, the line in the second position, which is for no, which is like an apostrophe S in English, to put it really simply. And they could use a sort of swirly sort of shape for the hiragana version of no, but they use a stylized form, the katakana, which, evokes a little bit more of a fantasy style, even like, katakana is often for like loan words or Western concepts or Western names or objects. So it's kind of stylized, but even more importantly, in Japanese, it really would be like the forest's kingdom. It's like an apostrophe S, or at the very least, like a kingdom of the forest. Like there's a possessiveness there, whereas translating it as forest's kingdom with an apostrophe S like sounds a bit awkward in English, so it makes sense why they just call it forest kingdom. It's much more clean, it makes more sense, it's a very direct name, but there are absolutely differences. Like forest kingdom sounds like forest is a modifier, like it's a kingdom of which the main component or the primary like element of the kingdom is a forest, like it's defined by its forest, a kingdom of forest. But the forest's kingdom, the forest possesses the kingdom, is very different. That implies that the kingdom belongs to or is within a forest, like the forest is above it on the hierarchy. So in a way, I'm sort of expecting potentially something that's more nature sounding. It's more forest than kingdom. Rather than it being an adjective for kingdom, it's actually the thing that possesses it. I just found that interesting, so I thought it might add a little bit of interesting context as well. But without further ado, me and my long intros, let's get started and see what I think of it. It's not what I was expecting. Holy shit. Okay, as usual, I'm going to talk a bunch after 30 seconds. Really not what I was expecting. And this is so interesting in how incredibly strongly this contrasts the Greatwood from Final Fantasy XVI, which I described as, again, you can go and listen to everything I said about it in that video. I think it might be worthwhile. But I said, like, especially after the first 30 to 60 seconds after the introduction, before it did mix some things up, I really felt like you could have told me it was a forest theme from a JRPG I'd played 15, 20 years ago, and I just kind of had forgotten. And I would have said, yeah, I've probably heard this before. That makes sense. I would have believed it. It really stuck to the tropes in the beginning of that piece, and then it actually did some things that I found distinctive, and I ended up really loving it. And I still like the tropes of those forest themes, but it was very close to that defined idiom, what you would expect to hear for a sunlit forest. This, on the other hand, is completely different. And what I would say is that this is a compositional approach where the composer has found a way to capture this feeling to make something that feels like it would be synergistic with the forest. Obviously, the image here as the soundtrack cover, looks like a forest, and it has some kingdom elements in it. It has some civilization. So I have to imagine this is probably the area that you hear this. Or if not, then at least, the game has different forest areas, and this is one of them. So, I do have the imagery along with it, just like I had for the FF16 video, potentially looking at that forest. But even, maybe I'm leaning on the imagery, but it feels like, despite not using an expected idiom sonically for this, and coming kind of out of nowhere with like an interesting percussion, metallic kind of percussion. I honestly don't remember at this moment like what that instrument is. It reminds me of like steel drums a little bit, but it might be something more typical than that even. But still, such a unexpected sound, and then the next couple layers of instruments that come in that we'll go back to are just not. It's nothing I would have predicted, and yet it still combines to give what feels like it would be a synergistic atmosphere with a forest environment. And 30 seconds in, I just want to give praise for like, that is not an easy thing to do with music. It's already difficult to just write great music that evokes certain feelings using the tools of the trade, like writing music that sounds like the thing you want it to sound like. That alone is an art. But using entirely different tools to make it sound like something specific. Something I love about music is the way that it functions as this universal language. It conjures emotions, imagery, these nuanced ideas, and sometimes it can conjure similar ideas in completely different people with completely different backgrounds. And that's how it functions as a language. And I feel like, I don't know, there's almost like a Corridors of Time-esque feeling to this already. Which shouldn't be too surprising to anybody based on the like similarities of that percussion sound. But that's another piece. Not only does it use similar instruments, but it's another piece that describes the setting it's in Chrono Trigger so accurately, and yet probably no other composer would have picked those instruments or that way to build that piece of music. So it's already an art form to craft something that sounds like what it ought to sound like, and to know how to do that. But to get there from an untrodden path is just really impressive. And again, I might be biased because I know it's titled that it's a forest. I have a forest image here. Like, if I had this with no context, would I think it was a forest? Probably not. But I do think I would be achieving the emotional resonance that it's trying to provide. And that is really the bigger deal. Like, I think I'm having an experience that emotionally is synergistic with being in a forest in a peaceful way. And that's also something that's reached in an original way. Anyways, I know I'm running my mouth here, but we'll go back, catch this intro again, and I'm just loving these unique layers built up. I should really just do like analysis videos on these topics, but I can't help it. I just think of these things. It's just like, what a combination of sounds. It's like two sounds, and it's so distinctive. And now we have 3, maybe 4 layers. And that synthiness, again, it feels like Corridors of Time. I was not expecting to hear like something paralleling to Corridors of Time in this piece. Ooh, really interesting melodic note choices. I love that metallic little clang. It starts to make it sound more material, like it's real objects. It reminds you of Civilization because you're picturing metal. So I love that it's continuing this pitched percussion, metallic, you could call it maybe an ostinato, like just a repeated pattern. What I really like is that it's doing almost like phasing in. Instead of just using that ostinato as like the melodic line, it's starting to become a background to another layer, which is of course, a common thing to do, to gradually add another layer as the other ones become the background. But it's like gradually throwing in more notes in a different instrument that start off I think it just started off with 2 notes, and I want to go back and find that. And then each time it comes in, it has a few more notes. I do want to catch the first time they do that. Is it here? I mean, like, there's 3 notes there. 4 notes there. Starts moving more. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, yes. Almost resolving? Okay, I guess it kind of resolves there, but not quite where I was thinking. I was almost going to start singing the resolution of that cadence, but I had a feeling it wasn't going to do it, and I didn't want to clash with it. But it was hard not to hum where I thought it was going to go, and then it kind of held off and did something different. Where do I even start? I mean, I was already talking about like what an original combination of sounds the piece was using already, and everybody listening must be laughing at me. Like, he doesn't know it's coming. Like, this is going to get really different. Not that like a sort of vocal element is like completely unheard of in a sort of forest piece, but in this way, it's like, I have to say for me, it's obviously it's like a kind of nasally singing. It's, kind of a choir. Like, it sounds like more than one voice. It sounds like a group of voices. They're very nasally, in a way that, like, of course you wouldn't traditionally think of as like beautiful singing, but of course it's very atmospheric here. There's no better or worse in this context. Like, it's has an artistic point. But what I really would say is that it like reminds me of, and maybe it's explicitly meant to be, but even without context, like, it reminds me of like forest sprites, like I don't know, like Shinto forest spirits. And I'm no expert in Shintoism, but it's like the imagery you get of like the Kodama, these forest spirits that are small and various shaped, at least, especially as you might see in, say, Princess Mononoke, in Studio Ghibli. Like, I'm just picturing that. Like, it just makes sense that this group of these like small, unique forest spirits have this like kind of nasally voice that comes together in the woods. Like, it just feels perfect to me to picture that. Man, I mean, I could go on all day about that, and that's just my impression as somebody who really doesn't know what he's talking about in this context. But I do just want to go back to this great moment where the harmony just kind of descended, or the bass did. Where is this? I think it might have been that. No, it's this. Oh, how satisfying is that? How rich and beautiful. Like, it's like has a sustaining harmony with this tension that you expect to resolve, and instead the bass note just sinks another bit, just a little deeper, and it takes this rich bottom level and deepens it even more, and changes the harmony in a direction that you're probably not expecting. Like, they stay on that, like they stay on that note when you would be expecting go, you would expect it to kind of resolve that way. Dun, dun. But it just stays on that note, deepens the bass note, harmonizes that, and it's just so rich and full. Again, it just feels like a huge thick trunk of a giant redwood or some tree that's just massive. Like, it feels like it's putting its roots deep in the earth. I'm gonna go back another 10, listen to this one more time and move on. Oh, and I forgot that vocal glissando down is so cool. It's so evocative. It's so like kind of mysterious, but also playful, which is exactly what I would imagine Kodama to be. And when it hits that little slide down, that little vocal glissando, it also just fits the vibes so well. It sounds like that's going to resolve, but it doesn't either. All right, and now we're gaming. Ooh, there's little metallic bell sounds as well. It's like a callback to the start of this piece, but it's quite different. All right, it's a new context for the voices. Interesting. The voices just drop out there. Yeah, it just gives entirely new context for the same structure with pretty much the same voices and the same vocal line, even that slide down glissando, and yet completely different context, completely different, sonic framework. And what I would say personally is that I would interpret us as having gone from forest to jungle. There's something very, jungle-esque about that kind of percussion. And I mean, I could be wrong, or maybe that's like reductive or something. And to be honest, like I'm also someone who can complain a little bit when people hear like horns used in a certain way in a piece and they're like, oh, it's hunting horns or it's war horns. And I've been at fault of jumping to that conclusion as well. And it's just like, not all horns have to be hunting horns. Like, yeah, that was common at one point in time hundreds of years ago, but like we don't have to always say that like some horns blaring in a piece have to connote a hunt. Like that's such a specific thing. In a similar way, like, maybe that's a misstep to label this sort of drum percussion like that. But I do think it's whether or not it's correct. I think its music is subjective. It's at least worth saying that my subjective feeling that I receive from hearing that kind of percussion is that it feels associated with the jungle, which is not far from, of course, like a forest context. And if I'm getting that impression, it's possible that's a common impression to get, which means it's possibly a lever that the composer's pulling to create that feeling because it's known that that's what it is evocative of to the listeners. So, all that to say, that's not necessarily a correct connection for what it sort of represents. Also, sounds don't have to represent anything. I love absolute music more than anything. In other words, music for its own sake. Music that exists without context. That's my favorite. So even though I might talk about what things evoke, what imagery they bring to mind, how they fit a setting or the environment in a game, those are like relevant conversation topics and they can be interesting. It can be fun to analyze. It's clearly related to the art of game music because they are part of a multimedia experience that does come with setting and imagery and theme. It is programmatic by nature. And yet, I don't want to be mistaken to be saying that things need to have a connotation or need to have something they represent. They can just be cool sounding drums. And somebody could listen to this and not know where it's from and not know what it's supposed to represent and just be told, here's a piece of music handed to somebody who doesn't even know what games are. And I think they would enjoy this. And they would possibly have their own opinions about it, what it makes them feel. And it could be purely emotional. It could have nothing to do with imagery. Anyways, that, again, another huge discussion for another time. But that's just what I like to think about when I talk about music. Yeah, so we've moved from like sort of the woods to the jungle in terms of the impression it gives to me. And as with other things, other game pieces that like add layers and they bring in percussion, they bring a little bit of this kind of epic sound, this activity. It, you know, I mentioned in some other ones, it happens in the Greatwood as well. Is that it reminds you you're playing a game. It reminds you that there's battle here. It reminds you that there's action, that you're a hero on a journey. Like, sometimes it's hard to keep a piece of music in a game at a lower peaceful level the whole time, especially if it's in an area where you can have action. You know, if it's a part of a large map in an action RPG or something where you can be fighting things, then it's a little hard. It might potentially not even be the best music for the game if it stays peaceful the whole time, and might create a little bit of a almost ludonarrative dissonance to be like, I'm fighting and destroying these things while this music is purely peaceful. Like, you know, is that weird? Not everybody might think so, but it might come up sometimes. So in a way, it's better to have this, even if you might listen and think for a moment, like, wouldn't it be nice if it was just that first peaceful part the whole way through? But that's not really what's happening in the game, so it's not fully supportive of the action in the game. Also, I'll bring up Hollow Knight again as an example of sort of reactive game music. That it could also be that this piece changes modes when you enter combat. It could be dynamic. And I don't know personally, just listening to the soundtrack track itself, if this is just a track that represents the mix of what you'll hear in the game, or if this is also the exact pattern and structure of the piece you hear in the game before it loops, right? This could be dynamic. This could just be the battle section, and it just blends into that, and then it blends back into the forest. I would love to hear if anybody knows if that happens in this game like it does in Hollow Knight. You know, imagine a track like Green Path in Hollow Knight. You know, it goes back and forth in the game. It doesn't actually exist in the soundtrack version, at least as far as I recall. Ooh, how cool is that? This little like trill with, I don't even know what it is. What an incredible instrument sound. And we've got this grand piano and string sound supporting like the epicness here. I love that strings counter melody there. That vocal style is so cool. The little 3-note pattern. 3 notes again. 4 notes. And now we get more. Oh, it's not even a loop point. It just backs off on its own. God, that sounds so good. Oh, that's so atmospheric. Oh, this is kind of new. It's really strings focused here. Yeah, the strings and piano that supported the previous bigger, heavier instrumentation section is now in the forefront. And it's really luscious. Oh, what a treat that they let us hear those layers in the front now. I didn't think the piece was going to have a new section at this point, and thought it would mostly be looping. Okay, now we do. What I do want to mention before I close up, I do want to go back and catch some of this again. So we have the voices, and then you bring in this kind of woodwind with this sort of trill. A little bit of this like kind of breathy sliding on it. What I wanted to say about this part is that, especially with this other very woody instrument sound coming in, is that like maybe like a wood like pan flute or something, I'm not sure, I could be totally wrong, is that I mentioned before, when you hear the metallic sounds from different instruments that are included here, it really does remind you of, you know, civilization, of that kingdom. And I just feel like at that point, it has 2 layers of metallic sounds and now 1 layer of wood sound. And I just feel like this feeling of metal and wood is like so, I mentioned it before, use the word material, but there's a very material quality of this like clangy metal and this like hollow wood with wind through it. Like, of course, any woodwind is like that, but this is a particularly woody sound. And it just makes me picture wood and metal, and like it feels so much like nature, but metal is very reminiscent of society and civilization and technology, at the very least primitive technology. And yeah, I feel like it creates such a sense of all these materials, and at that point they brought in the most layers of it at once. And yeah, it's just kind of striking, that combination. And then, yeah, we get kind of treated to, all of a sudden, the, you know, sort of grand piano and string section that got brought in as support for the part, the, you know, jungle part, as per my, you know, association I tried to give it, that they were brought in very much in the background for that part. In fact, you couldn't really hear the grand piano apart from giving some bass support. And doing its job well there, but very much in the background. And then they give us this whole section where we actually get to hear it, and we get to enjoy the string melody that before was more harmonic support with just 1 or 2 little counter melodies of like 3 notes. And now they just let us enjoy this as the main melodic carrier. And I just really appreciate, it's like, what a treat for them to let us have that before the loop is done. Okay, well, I'm going to lower the volume on it. I'm going to let it start over, and we're going to wrap up. I'm sure this video's already been pretty long, but by now you're learning that's my style, you know? Maybe, again, I'll have some focused analysis on a certain topic in the future, but yeah, this is what I like to do. Like, for me, this is how I experience music. If I were to listen and, you know, take 10 minutes to go through a 5-minute piece of music, or less, that probably would mean I didn't really have fun. If I couldn't think of things to say, if I wasn't having thoughts, if it wasn't sparking discussion or ideas for me that I really wanted to express, and even just play around with, then I probably didn't really enjoy myself. I didn't experience it the way I wanted to. So really, this is more for me than anything else. Like, this is what experiencing music freshly and really being engaged with it and conscious about it, it's what it's about for me, is like what does it bring to mind, and exploring that. So, you know, it can take me 30 to 60 minutes to get through 5 minutes of music sometimes, but it's a chance to open some gateways to different topics of discussion. It's a chance to explore my own perception of music, chance to explore the subjectivity of this art, different evocations. And yeah, I mean, is it the greatest thing for like a YouTube algorithm or watch time or something? Like, probably not, but it's authentic. This is how I like to experience music, and I really love to talk about it, and I love to play with ideas, and I love to hear other people's ideas. Like, why not just go all the way with it? So this is how I have fun. And this piece was very, very fun. And before I actually wrap up, I'm just gonna say it. It's on here. It's on the Forest playlist. You know what though? I'm almost convinced to not put it on the Forest Core playlist, because I'm not sure if it's going to sound anything like the other Forest pieces. I think it might just sound completely different from them. It might even be the wrong playlist. Although at the moment I don't know what other one I would put it on that's here, or if I would make a new one. I'm going to try it here for now. I'm going to, put it on the Forest playlist, and we'll see if I like it there when I use the playlist. But yeah, it's almost like it's so original from them that it might stand out too much to be like grouped with just like, oh, it sounds like this, so this is the right playlist. Yeah, so what can I say that I haven't already said? Obviously, I had an incredible time with this piece. It was so cool. It's really distinctive. It's really memorable. I would probably have to pick it as preferring it to the Greatwood from FF16 if I'm just doing, a series of Forest videos. Maybe I'll keep doing some. Shout out if you have some other favorite Woods music from games. I would love to continue analyzing them in the same vein. But they're also quite different. I don't really think it's fair to pick a favorite. They're unique pieces of music, and I like them both. But I think I enjoyed myself even more with this one. It's just full of so much to talk about. It really is. I can see why it's a favorite. It really does make me excited to listen to more NieR Automata music, which I've wanted to do for a long time, but I don't know. Sometimes when I haven't played a game and I don't have a connection to its soundtrack, I just am not really that motivated to explore it, because there's so many games, there's so much music. I don't usually pick up becoming a fan of music for something I haven't played. But that means this is all unspoiled for me, and it makes me really want to play the game, and it makes me really want to listen to more music from it. So, as always, I will see you in my next video soon, probably tomorrow. And please drop me suggestions if you want. I'm kind of looking forward to doing a multi-track thing from a game again, like I did for Fire Emblem 4, where I pick, 3 or 4 tracks, maybe have them from suggestions, and I go through all of them in one video. I would love to do that again and have a game to do that for. Would have been great to do with NieR, but I actually kind of wanted to do like a whole one just for this Forest piece, because I like these. I'd like to do more that are on Forest music. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.